This is going to be a quick look at some of the experiments I've been making in the new Stillman Birn sketchbooks. This is the Espsilon series. It's a heavyweight paper for pen and ink, natural white, 100-pound. It's got a plate surface, and this book happens to be 8.5 by 11 inches. I'll have more about my comments on my blog at rozwoundup.typepad.com, but I just wanted to flip through some things so you could see them quickly. It has a nice heavyweight stiff cover, and also I think you can probably see from here I've started at the back, which is where I test books, and there's a lot of buckling because I used wet media in this book. So let me just go through here, starting at the back, and again I'll have more comments so you can ignore this stuff. But I tested all of my favorite pens, and all of them took longer to dry on this paper and did bleed a little bit. That's not a deal breaker for me, because when you put watercolor over something you can hide a little bit of bleeding, and definitely can hide something with gouache. So that wasn't a problem for me. Dick really liked it with his Noodler's ink, and I think we've got a convert. He might start doing lab books with it. This is with the Pentel Pocket brush pen, and the ink stays wetter longer on this paper, so much so that I got some on my hand and transferred it to another area, and then when I closed the page I actually got some transfer over here. So you're going to have to allow for that by holding the book open a little bit longer. Just something to notice. At 100 pounds, it is a lighter weight sheet than most people doing mixed media are probably used to using, and you are going to be able to see, I don't know if this will show up on the video, but I have another drawing of Gert over here. If you look on this one, you can see through to the other page. That's not a deal breaker for me either, because I make books out of Velin arches, and that's a slightly lighter weight paper still, and I like the working capabilities of that paper. So if you like the working capabilities, I would live with a little show through. The ink is not bleeding through the paper, it's just showing through. Here's some watercolor. It isn't a watercolor paper, so the strokes are going to be different than what you get on watercolor, but you can manage and lay in your washes if you work at it a little bit. One thing I wanted you to notice is that just by hearing the paper bend, you can get a sense of how much it buckles. It really, really buckles. A page with no wet media on it does not buckle like that. Okay, so that's the watercolor. Here's gouache. Tends to hold on even better and more vibrantly. The coarser pigments are good on this. This page is a test of a bunch of things. Pentel Pocket brush pen ink on a page that was wet on the other side. It didn't bleed through, so it's a sturdy sheet even though it's thin. Smears of rubber stamp ink, stencil of rubber stamp ink. This is an example of how it is going to bleed a little bit because it takes longer to dry, especially where you've heavily applied the ink. The two surfaces seem to me slightly different, but I haven't used it that much, so it may just be I'm not used to it yet. Color brush, which is not an archival art medium, is very fun to use on this paper because of the plate surface. The Slicky pen, any of those gel pens work really well on this surface. Aqua markers, which was something that I'm pretty much had given up hope on, work fabulously well on this paper, to the point that I think if you're a marker person, this is the kind of book you should be working in. They dissolve very quickly and nicely. Stabilo Alls also dissolve very nicely. I also did this quick sketch of using Stabilo Tone, and I did a dry layer. I wet that. When that was dry, I put on another layer and burnished it all up with my finger. And it really, the paper stood up to it, so I was really surprised. The only downside is that it rubs off on the opposite page more so than in other books, with other papers that I've used like that. So something to keep in mind. Calligraphy pen, Collage is another thing for mixed media artists. If you're going to do collage, this is a very lightweight piece of paper, and it's already made this page very stiff. So you want to use the lightest weight papers you can if you're going to do collage. This was done with a bamboo pen and acrylic ink, and even that bled just doesn't dry quickly on this paper, so you're just going to have to allow a little bit more time. This is gouache in the background and then rubber stamp inks smeared everywhere. So again, there's some pros and cons to the paper. It's a very nicely made book. I'll have more to say about that in my blog post at rozwoundup.typepad.com.